Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel. In this video I'm going to be reviewing, there's no unboxing for this because it basically just shipped in a plastic bag. This is the 5mm thick carbon fiber chassis kit for the WLToys 104001 1/10 scale all-wheel drive buggy. And the 5mm kit comes with a 5mm chassis pan, and then it comes with the front and rear carbon fiber shock towers in 3mm thick carbon. The engine, the transmission plate that kind of links the two brackets for the, that's basically a flywheel. I'll go over all of this in greater detail. And a small carbon piece for the front body mount, which I'm not going to use because I've switched to using Velcro to attach the body to the chassis pan. So all of this and the assembly will be gone over in detail. Hopefully this is going to be lighter substantially and stronger substantially. No more flex issues. There is an issue with flex on the front of the chassis, but these do not have any kick. As you can see, it is flat. So to add kick, I have designed and 3D printed a bracket. Basically, it's just a wedge that goes under the front differential, adds 5 degrees of kick that is currently missing from this piece. So we'll see how everything goes together and how it runs. Okay, these are the parts that I received. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is not all of the parts shown in the 2mm kit, and I didn't see anything that specified that the 5mm kit would be any different in parts count other than the thicknesses of the materials. That was the only difference, supposedly. Not that big a deal, but it would have been nice to have those other items, even if I didn't use them. In any event, I think this is definitely the better kit. I don't know anybody who personally who has ever tried to manipulate carbon fiber laminate with heat. I think it's a terrible idea. Carbon fiber laminate is designed in such a way that it's not made to be altered other than things like drilling holes or shaping. But if it's flat, it's made to be flat. And one of the strengths of carbon fiber, its benefits, is that depending on how you manipulate the direction of the weave, you can make a part that is more flexible in one direction than another, or not flexible at all. And that depends on the direction of the fibers, how many layers in which direction, and other factors. There's a lot of science and research and whatnot that went into designing these materials in the first place. Trying to heat something like this up and put a bend into it, I think, is a terrible idea. It is definitely not something that anybody should try doing. You're more likely to destroy the material than to get any kind of positive effect out of it. So I went with the 5mm for several reasons. Number one, I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to have any flex at the front end. Now, a lot of kits have a certain amount of flex or allow for a certain amount of flex. That's a reason that you see cars with angular braces that can be moved to different positions, that can have the holes changed, things of that nature, or even the thicknesses of the braces changed. That is to allow for a certain amount of flex. The stock chassis on this car obviously had way too much flex, and no real way of dealing with that. That's why people like me and some others have created 3D printable braces. Now, the other reason for getting this kit, the 5mm over the 2mm, is that for the 2mm kit, everything is 2mm thick carbon. That's not enough, in my opinion, for things like shock towers. A lot of shock towers are 4mm thick. So having these be 3 is what I would consider the minimum for this type of buggy, to not have any flex up in the towers. Another thing is that I was hoping all of the pieces were going to be there and I would have the option to run the lower stressors, but again, I don't think those are going to be needed at all. I think that is just going to be dead weight, because at 5mm thick, this is a brick. It is not going to have any flex in it. Certainly not from, you know, the running gear. I mean, you could put this in a vise and make it flex. Okay, it's not impervious, but at the same time, what it's going to be used for, it shouldn't have any flexibility. Now, the issue with either the 2 or the 5 is getting the kick back in the front. Kick is part of what makes up the caster of the vehicle. If other parts were available for this kit, such as steering knuckles with a higher degree of caster, we could maybe make up for that missing 5 degrees, but there aren't. And a lot of vehicles have a certain amount of caster at the front end to provide a certain amount of, okay, in the same way that you can adjust the rear to change traction, and where it comes into play, like coming out of turns, things like that. You can add or remove spacers under your rear differential to change the angle of the pivot points of the rear swing arms. That, combined with the torque coming out of the drive shafts, it's a big complex series of calculations that give you a certain kind of effect. Okay, so not having that kick here is potentially a problem. So I've basically designed this in CAD. It's a little 5-degree wedge with a little bumper built into it to protect this carbon fiber, because once this is assembled, this edge here is going to be vulnerable to impacting things, even just rocks, that are going to dig away at it and destroy it eventually, make it split, and that's a problem. So this will give us the kick, and it blocks the front edge from impact, and I've designed it with a bit of a curvature to it so that it helps it get up and over things instead of just running hard into them. So I will be adding that to my assembly. As far as whether I'm going to make this available to the public and in what form, whether I'm going to sell it, I really haven't decided. I sold some people some braces. It was a lot of work. I wasn't getting very much for it, and certainly not getting my time and efforts worth. but maybe I can do something with these if people request them. So contact me if you want, and I'll see what I can do for you. So if you're looking to eliminate the flex in your car and you want to go with the carbon kit, this is a great way to go. It's also going to dramatically lighten things up, and I'm going to show you as I go through. I'm going to comparatively weigh these pieces and add up the total weight savings over the course of the assembly. So I'll give you those numbers. So anyway, enough chatter about those things. I'm going to go ahead and start taking this car apart, and there's no need to talk through that process. There's nothing to see. If you've watched my other videos, you've seen them. You've seen this thing come apart already. I recommend Velcroing your body. It's very easy to do with some stick-on Velcro. Just trim it to size, stick it on the body, stick it on the chassis, and you're in business. It's certainly a better way to go than those pins, and it eliminates some weight because you can get rid of that metal bracket at the rear. They do give us that's what I believe this piece here is for replacing one of the pins. I'm not going to use that. It must be for the rear, because if this was in the front, it would potentially interfere with steering there. I'm not going to need my braces, and I'm not going to need these plastic braces down below, and I've already eliminated the metal braces, so all of that stuff is going to go in favor of that nice thick 5mm chassis plate. So that will, you know, overall have a pretty dramatic reduction on the car's weight. Now, I mentioned this during an earlier video. I had some items that I was going to add to this to upgrade it, bring it up to true 1/10 scale level performance for mod class. I'm putting in a Rude Dog RC 2009. It's a digital high-speed servo. It's quite fast, very torquey. Voltage between 6 and 7.4. I'll be running it at max. It's not the fastest at 0.09 max speed for its turning radius, but it's still decent, and the torque is 180 to 200 grams. So plenty for what I'm going to be using it for. Waterproof receiver for my Airtronics Sanwa transmitter. A Hobby Wing XU-Run XR10 Pro Elite. This is a 160 amp ESC. They're quite small as far as their footprint goes, and they work really well. A lot of adjustability, and this is just a shockingly fast and powerful motor. It's a Tiken Gen 2 Redline 8.5 turn. I had this in a two-wheel drive short course truck, and it was almost undrivable at that level of power. Very, very fast motor. Tiken Redline motors are just awesome. So I'll be putting that in here as well. So I'm doing a pretty big change over here now that I've got the chassis in. Everything is going to be different. I've already done changes to the suspension on this, as you've seen from previous videos. I've got sway bars in here. I've rebuilt the shocks, did a proper rebuild on them. I've got good you know, high-end weight springs in here. The weight isn't high-end, the springs are. They are, I think these are associated or TLR springs, I forget which. Might even be a combination of the two, but it's a good set of springs that are weighted for this class of vehicle, this style and configuration. So it's a good starting point. Everything else is going to be swapped out. So there won't be much of the original car left by the time I'm done here today. And what is left will have been touched or changed in some way for the most part. So it should be a really nice buggy. Okay, I'm just doing the disassembly and been comparing some stuff along the way. Wanted to talk about that. The holes in the chassis are perfect. If you look at the two with a light behind, it becomes very clear that they are just right spot on. Likewise with the shock towers. Let me see if I can do something to help make this a little more visible for you. See if I hold a piece of white paper behind here and get a good grip on the two pieces together. You should be able to see there that the holes are perfect. The pieces are identical. They actually are cutting the exact same shape. Every feature is recreated perfectly. Now let's talk about weight. The chassis, this aluminum chassis is lighter than the carbon fiber piece, which is substantially thicker. So yes, it's a bit heavier, but when you combine the weight of this with these two metal braces right here, we have a difference of only 12 grams in favor of the original parts, being 11 to 12 grams lighter. It's 11 with, you know, a factor of, you know, 0.5, 0.7, 0.2, something along in there. 11 to 12 grams, depending on how many times you weigh it. Anyway, whereas with the combined towers and the two shock towers and this piece that goes around the diff and secures the two mounts, that has a benefit of 67.3 grams weight savings for the carbon parts. That's pretty substantial. Now, one thing I am going to be doing that I have not talked about or done yet is I'm going to be taking thin CA and I'm going to be running a little bead of thin CA all the way around the upper edges of the shock towers. It's not necessary to do for this piece. I would also do it to the front edge of your chassis. Well, that would actually be this edge here, just to help make sure that doesn't split. Likewise, it helps protect these pieces during rollovers because they are exposed and they can take a bit of a beating. And this is pretty much standard procedure when you're building any type of race buggy, is to seal the edges with thin CA. You want to use the thinnest CA you have because you want it to wick into the material, into the weave, and help permanently bind it. You don't need to go all the way around. You don't need to do the inner area or the holes. Just, you know, do your outer edge here and mainly the areas that are likely to contact the ground. So we are definitely getting a weight savings, and that is a very important weight savings because it's weight up high. That is lowering our center of gravity, and that is going to really benefit us, reducing the probability of rollovers and things of that nature. Now, these are not going to be needed. In fact, the plastic pieces are not needed either. I would use this piece. It's very light. Let's see, without the hardware. Okay, it's 12 grams. If you wanted to, you could cut it. This is not going to add any strength to our 5mm thick chassis. If you had the 2mm kit, I would say yes, definitely keep this piece. The reason we need a part of it is because the front of our differential here, for both front and rear, mounts to the chassis via this, and there's a spacer that I 3D printed, so if you have one of my kits, you should have that. That's this little guy right here. Goes in between here, it replaces the metal piece. What I may just do is print a taller version of this to completely replace this piece here, since this is now extraneous. There's no reason to put that in place. I don't think we're going to be getting any flex along the length of this chassis. It's just too strong, it's too thick. So if I do put it in, it will just be to save time in this assembly process, to make up that space here with the spacer. But other than that, there's no reason to have it along for the ride. So basically it goes right here. So anyway, that covers all the interesting stuff up to this point. Bear in mind that you are going to need new hardware for certain pieces. For example, these pieces, these screws right here that I use to attach my this is all non-stock hardware. It's all hex head hardware that I replaced. I'm going to need to go up at least 2 milligrams in length on almost every screw that I use, the length of the chassis, to make up for the extra thickness of this material. So bear that in mind. So you will need some new hardware, and this is a good chance to go ahead and get rid of the old Phillips head hardware and replace it with quality hex head hardware. If you put this together with short screws, you're not going to have as much material, especially things like motor mounts, things like that. You run the risk of tearing those items off of the chassis and really doing some damage you can't easily fix. So make sure you get the right hardware for this build. I'm kind of surprised a hardware kit to go with this would have been helpful. Now, the servo bracket is a standard size, so I'm going to be able to use this existing piece with my brand new servo. Okay, I changed my mind and decided to seal this all the way around the chassis, and that is because when you put on the side pieces, excuse me, like so, as you can see, there's a lot of carbon fiber showing, and that is potentially an impact issue. So I wanted to seal this and make sure this chassis lasts as long as possible. So I'm going to be attaching the pans and then starting to mount things on. So I just thought I would show you in process here. I'm currently doing soldering on electronics. Got my sensor wire for the motor routed around here. The ESC, the communication cable that is going to go to the receiver, travels across the bottom on top of the pan here. And if you'll notice, there is a piece of this is normally a flat cable. There is a piece of heat shrink tubing that I have put across it about 2 inches long, and I will use that surface to two-sided tape that down to the deck or anchor it in some other fashion. I may use a like a looped tab with a screw. There's a convenient hole there that I can run a bolt up from below. and that will keep that down. So even when this gets modified to have a slipper or something in here, that cable is going to be clear. It can't touch up against this, and if it did, it is shielded by that heat shrink tubing. I'm using some of my little printed pieces here. A handful of them in different colors and 2 different sizes for different gauge wiring. 2 and 3 wire tabs. I just slide them onto my wires ahead of time and then space them out as I need them. I usually put on an extra beyond what I think I might need, and then I can just cut it off with a pair of cutters. But this allows me to route my wires nice and cleanly. I've got my 2 capacitors zip tied to the wiring group here, and these little tabs allow me to kind of adjust the routing of the wire. I may tack it down here just to keep it from wandering, and then when I need to move it, I can just snip the one zip tie and cut it away. But that will keep that anchored, and then I'm going to be moving my 2 wires over here for power. I'm going to be soldering those onto a pair of 4 and 5 millimeter male barrels, as I like to use the 4 and 5. So for example, this is a 4 millimeter pack here, so those are only going to go in about that far. So what I'll be doing is soldering these in more of a vertical configuration as opposed to a sideways configuration. And I have this little piece of red heat shrink or fuel tubing, whatever it is, that actually came on the ESC. I'm going to leave that on my wire. I'm also going to make the positive wire shorter than the negative wire, short enough that it can't reach over to the negative side, and that way you never have a misconnection, because even a second of mispolarity or reverse polarity will burn these little suckers right out. I definitely like the Elite Hobby Wing ESC. It's got a port for an on-off switch, which it did not come with, but I may order one of those. But it's easy enough just to pull one of the battery connectors. Now I am also going to be hooking up a fan, and I've got that right over here, and that's something I really should address at this time because space is limited for that. I think what I'm going to be doing is using one of these connectors. This is an Exotech part. Basically, it's a little aluminum strap that has a 90-degree angle with 3 separate attachment points. So I can put this around the motor and then position the fan exactly where I want it. The fan I'm going to power directly off of the battery lead, so it's getting juice straight from the battery. So as soon as the battery is plugged in, the fan starts running. That's a good way to kind of remind yourself that your battery's plugged in, you're draining. Keeps you from forgetting about it and leaving your car plugged in when you shouldn't. So that's kind of where things are. Let me just kind of take you on a tour. I did go ahead and use the plastic bracket here because that provides a little more anchoring for the rear diff. I did not do that in the front. The problem with the way they designed this is that this bracket has to be bolted down to provide any use at all for anchoring the diff. The diff is really anchored on its main four screws that come in from below. If you don't have this bracket in there, there are no corresponding holes in the chassis to these 2 holes here. There's nothing that connects through. So you're really only getting so much strength out of this. I used some slightly longer screws at the front and rear holes that go almost to the top of the plastic. In fact, they actually go through by about a millimeter, and that provides as much thread contact as is possible with that piece. So it only weighed 11-12 grams, so I don't mind having it there. It does provide a little bit of reduced flex for the rear of the chassis, if there even is any. I went ahead and moved my battery mount that I 3D designed and printed in previous video. I'm really like the way this setup works. I've got a new strap on order that is at least 20 millimeters to 50 millimeters longer, because this is a little short. It really doesn't have enough overlap. I mean, it holds the battery down, but I'm not comfortable with only about a 1/4 inch of overlap Velcro, maybe a 1/2 inch at most. So I want to get that done. I did use the stock servo mount with my Rude Dog servo, and I used it's a ProTech RC metal arm. I'm going to be putting a second a nut back here, just a stop nut. This is threaded, but I want to have the peace of mind of another lock nut on the opposite side here. This is a pass-through. In other words, this screw goes through a pair of 2 millimeter spacers, so 4 millimeters total, through the ball stud barrel, and then underneath the plastic arm is a aluminum lock nut that keeps that whole assembly together and locked to that arm, so there's no flex or play. It's nice and solid, and it's not going to pull free no matter what. So one thing I am going to be doing first thing when I tune the radio is adjusting the stops on this, adjust the endpoints programmatically, so that this arm cannot press against the servo housing, either on this end of the swing or this end of the swing. If it goes too far this way, it'll actually contact the steering upright. So that needs to be done in the transmitter itself, and then I can adjust throw and things like that from there for the the rest of the suspension or the rest of the steering setup. Otherwise, everything is looking good. I definitely like this kit. Everything went together very nicely. This piece here, I went ahead and did it in red because I had a spool of red already on the printer, and I was in process of doing some printing some red stuff, so I went ahead and just ran one off. I can swap this for a black one with basically taking out 4 bolts and loosening 1 or 2 others, and just slide that out and stick in another one if I want to go with a different color. There's no need to use the front bumper that comes with the kit, because all it's doing is covering this piece of metal here, which is more than covered by this item now. I could actually shorten this a bit, but I figured by making it a little longer, it adds overall strength to this kind of joint area, so that when this thing does take hits, it's less likely to break it off, because there's more material there. So I'm fine with it as it is. And so the car is just about done. Since I have so much titanium hardware in the smaller sizes like 8s, 10s, and 12s, I went ahead and used titanium when I mounted up the shock towers, and you know, no big deal. It's not really shedding any substantial weight. I used it up here as well. Here, here, and here. You know, just in and around. Back here, I did steel for all of the motor connections just to make sure that I had that those were solid and wasn't going to be an issue. Make sure you set your lash, that you got a little bit of play there. So everything is pretty much done. I've got a few little cleanups. I've got to mount my receiver. The receiver is going to go right here on top of this panel here. Let's see, right here. I will probably mount it like this. I would like to try to mount an antenna post on here, but I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do that because I don't think I have an antenna post mount. I have plenty of the plastic antenna housing. It's a matter of I may just have to design one up in CAD and 3D print it. I mean, that's a few minutes worth of work in CAD, nothing big. So I guess I'll do that and then cut a appropriate hole in the body. I've just kind of gotten in the habit of putting in one of these fans in almost every kit because they are they're so powerful. These little rocket fans, I get them off Amazon. They're about $14 to $16 a piece, and they spin at just over 28,000 RPM. They really push some air. And in the case of this motor, there's not a lot of air intake spots, so I'm going to want to position it very strategically so as to cool this as much as possible. Probably something like this, and let it blow down into this hole and these holes along here, and let the rest of it just wash over the metal can. So good to go. The way I've got this mounted, the port for tuning and programming the speed control is right here. So I just need to pull that little rubber plug off. I've got my little switch, programming switch here. So just plug this in, plug it into the programming box, hook it to the computer, and I can get the latest firmware. Nice and easy. So that's all good to go. I've got a little extra space back here, which there's nothing I can really put there. I could, I suppose, put some weights here if I need to balance things, but I don't think I'm going to want to add any weight. This, unfortunately, is going to be a heavy car because of this, the drive shafts, these big suckers right here and here. It's just it's heavy. There's no way around it. And there's some things that I just can't get rid of, you know, like these metal pieces right here. There are no substitutes for those. I'm not even going to try. I have a good all-wheel drive. This is kind of an experiment for you guys to show you this build process, to kind of take this car as far as it can go in the direction of building a racer, not building a basher. I think I would be comfortable taking this to the track and racing it, and I'm certainly going to give it a try and see how it does. This is still the issue. That the amount of 3.11 ounces is just crazy. Hopefully somebody out there finds preferably a center diff. I'll take a slipper clutch if it's all I can get my hands on. Hopefully someone finds one that fits here. And if you do, if you know of one, if someone has brought one out onto the market, please let me know. I would greatly appreciate it. And I would love to pass that link on to everybody so that anybody who has one of these can get rid of this monster. So so there we go. There is one final thing I could be doing to this and may do, and that is swapping out these shock absorbers for a good set of shocks. I've got some older shock absorbers from an old TLR 22, which is an 1/10 scale off-road car. Those would work, they're big bore shocks, they would work with all the springs I already have, and you know, have things like the titanium coated shock shafts, things like that. They have double seals with the X seals, so it's a professional level race quality set of shock absorbers, and it swaps parts with all the other kits I have. So that's a good way to potentially go, and I may do that. I guess I want to see if the car merits it. If I can't get a center diff for this down the road at some point, I will probably strip the good electronics out of this and build them into another kit down the road, and just put the original electronics in this and either keep it as a fun basher, or you know, sell it to one of my viewers, or put it on eBay for the public to bid on. So we'll see. Another one of the perks of 3D printing is being able to throw together something like that in about 5 minutes in CAD and 12 minutes in the printer. And now that I've made this once, I can do it again as many times as I want to. I'm actually going to shorten that a little bit. So I'm going to anchor it here. I've already got a hole in the body. Hopefully that will be correct or close enough. And that's one of the things with this, the way I've kind of designed this like an L. I can swing it around a little bit, get a change of location or slight change. See how that does. I'll just tuck those in for now. Okay, I need to. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to print a fresh one, and I'm going to move that outward several millimeters. Let's see, how far do I need to go? Because I didn't want to go drilling a hole in the top. So I need at least 1.5 centimeters. Piece of cake. So I've finished up the wiring almost. Just got to do the antenna. As you can see, I've got the motor wires all routed and tied down. I went ahead and attached the caps to this piece of carbon fiber right there. I may cut it free from the wires and let the, we'll see. Anyway, positive and negative battery wires. Again, use some of my little cable organizers. I like connecting the fans directly to the contacts for the battery. I find it really helps to put a small piece of heat shrink tubing on each of them, so it kind of helps run the wires a little bit up from them. They're not just splitting off from the connector. So again, they are, you know, sides so that the positive cannot reach the negative side. Just plug that in. we go. Everything's powered up. Nothing can get at the fan. The fan's blowing straight in where I wanted it. Nice and solid mount. These little aluminum brackets are amazingly solid. That's just one bolt holding this aluminum fan on, and it is not going anywhere. So I have reprinted the antenna mount. I made it a millimeter thicker and considerably longer to be able to hopefully get this over to where it needs to be. I also switched the cut for the antenna wire to the opposite side, so it's facing the side where I really need it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in place and see if this is going to be positioned properly. Okay, got a little clearance issue over here. I need to do something with those caps, but as you can see, my antenna piece comes straight out through the body, perfectly positioned. So I can tighten that down. Just leave that right there. So got all that figured out. Can't think of anything else I need to do other than to set up the speed control. Just got to download the latest firmware and tune it for first run testing. And of course I'm going to have to tune the radio, bind the receiver, and get all that done. But otherwise everything is ready. I don't have any more clearancing issues. Go ahead and unplug that battery and take this out. I went ahead and folded this wire a couple times on itself and then used some clear heat shrink to get that snugged in there. I could have cut it to a specific length and crimped to set a new connector, but I don't know that this is going to stay in this car, so I didn't want to violate the wire. Now the connector from the ESC to the receiver, I mentioned earlier that goes across the bottom of the pan. It's got heat shrink over it for about a 2-inch section. I also used, let me just pull one out and show you. I used one of these, and the rearmost hole for the Ford chassis stiffener, I went ahead and used that hole with a flathead coming from below and a aluminum M3 nut, nylon lock nut on top, to just, it's not tight around the wire, it just holds it in place, keeps it low against the chassis, keeps it from moving around, and that works perfectly for that. So I can't think, other than just you know, doing tuning as far as, you know, checking toe, camber, binding, and updating the firmware and setting the ESC. Otherwise everything is done. The carbon fiber parts are all installed. As you can see, the nice shiny surface that the carbon fiber gets when you seal it with CA. That's all taken care of. And as I did mention, I did do the chassis all the way around. So the next video I'll be showing you first runs. I'm not even going to bother with these tires. They're pretty terrible. They're more plastic than rubber. I've got some good all-wheel drive buggy wheels and tires, and I'll be gluing up a couple sets of those. I do need to put the rear wing back on. But other than that, it's all together. So that's how you do the carbon fiber update, along with doing a motor swap. Now, there weren't any issues that I found. Things I would recommend when you're putting the plastic side panels onto the chassis. If you look closely, you can see that the screws I used are long enough that they actually protrude by about 1 millimeter to 2 millimeters at either end. These are the front and rear most. Those are the ones that have the tallest piece of plastic. It's going to have the most threads, and that allows you to anchor these as tightly as possible. This is very soft plastic. I even considered using slightly longer screws and putting a lock nut front and rear. I may do that down the road at some point, but at this point I'm just going to let it roll as is. But all of the places where the screws go through and anchor, there's only 3 on this side and 4 on this side. There are other things that help hold them down, like the motor mount presses down against the plastic. Our servo helps mount, but that also means that the servo is halfway mounted onto this. So again, that's why I used the longer screws, made sure that these plastic side pods were firmly attached to the chassis. It's a very tight fit up against the side of the carbon fiber. You almost need to kind of bend them sideways a little bit, get the screws started, and then hold them flat while you finish tightening. You'll see what I mean when you get into the process. Otherwise, everything fits properly, everything goes smoothly. I think it was the front one, it was a little snug against the diff. I had to kind of squeeze it on, but nothing that I would even remotely say was a problem with the way things were made or whatever. It's just tight. Once it was snugged into place, there was no issues. Everything fit. So I definitely recommend this 5 millimeter kit. So that's it's up to you what you do with your car, but I really like the way this came out. And with the 5-degree kick brace that I've put in here and bumper, I really shouldn't have any issues with damaging the carbon fiber, at least at the front edge. Seal all of your parts, at least the tops of your shock towers and the entire perimeter of your chassis, regardless of whether you're going with 2 millimeter or 5 millimeter kit. Make sure you seal those so they don't start delaminating on you at some point, especially as they pick up impact damage from driving off-road. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel.